Alrighty.
Hello there, friends of Nagara. Happy Thursday and welcome to today's Sponsor Solutions Series presentation, Designing Our Digital Future, a comprehensive guide to digital transformation, presented by Nagara contributor sponsor Gimmal. I'm Johnny Hadlock, the Executive Director of Nagara, and on behalf of the Nagara Board of Directors, we thank you for joining us for today's presentation. There's just a couple of housekeeping items and a few announcements that I'd like to go over before we begin. First, today's presentation is being recorded, and the recording, along with our presenter's PowerPoint presentation, will be uploaded and available to you in the Sponsor Solutions Series archive on the Nagara website by tomorrow morning. And second, we're going to have a question and answer session, but at the very end of today's presentation. However, if at any point in time you have a question that you'd like to ask, we invite you to do so by entering that into the chat box, which is the little chat bubble at the lower right-hand side of your WebEx window, if you can look for that now. We'll get to those questions at the end, but you can enter them as we go along the presentation. Nagara wants to acknowledge the support of our 2024 corporate sponsors, whose logos are shown here on the screen. Their support has been instrumental in helping our association fulfill and achieve our very ambitious mission. And without their support, it would just be far more challenging for us to achieve our objectives and to make the lasting impact on the government archives, records, and information management community that we really want to make. So thank you to our 2024 corporate sponsors. If you have some time, each of them have a company profile page on the Nagara website. I encourage you to go and visit them to see what products and services they offer to you. Also, Nagara is thrilled to announce, and you may have just seen in your email earlier this morning, that we have reached an historic milestone, surpassing 2,000 members. The Board of Directors wants to extend their heartfelt thanks to all of Nagara's stakeholders. That's you, the members, our dozens and dozens of volunteers, our sponsors and exhibitors, and professional staff. It's you, the members, who make Nagara the growing and thriving community that it is, and we really do thank you. We're honored and we're humbled by this achievement and appreciate the trust you've put in us to deliver on our promise to you. And we pledge to continue working in your service, and we won't let you down. Thank you for being part of Nagara. As many of you know, just last week, Nagara wrapped up our 2024 annual conference in Atlanta, Georgia. And we had over 420 attendees there that joined us for our 40th anniversary event. It was a remarkable week. It was full of learning, networking, celebration, and lots of flight cancellations on Friday afternoon. But really, seriously, it was a great time, and it left attendees informed and inspired. And we want to thank all of those who participated and who made last week such a great success. We know not all of you could join us, but we hope you're able to come to a future event. And to whet your appetite, we invite you to check out the pictures, nearly 3,000 pictures from this year's conference already on the Nagara website that you can go and peruse at your leisure, nagara.org/annual conference archive. What a fun time. And speaking of annual conferences, Nagara is already in the planning stages for next year's event that will be hosted in Oklahoma City. Just yesterday, you should have also received an email notification announcing the call for applications for all members who are interested in serving on the conference program committee. Now, while there's only 15 spots on that committee, it's a small group, we invite all members who are interested in applying to serve. The deadline is August 7th. That's about 2 weeks away. Not everyone's going to be able to serve, but we will use you where we can, session evaluators and other options or other opportunities we have. But we encourage you, if you want to be involved for next year's conference, to please go and fill out that application. You can learn more on the website, nagara.org/annual conference. Okay, that is most of the announcements out of the way. I just wanted to highlight something here. Nagara offers lots of professional development opportunities. It's part of our mission to, provide good content, community, and connection to our people. We do that through both webinars and through Sponsor Solution Series. There are some similarities, but there are also some differences that I just want to run over. First, a Nagara webinar. Those are free for members, just like these Sponsor Solution Series presentations. But for a Nagara webinar, you would have to pay if you're not a member, just $39. Still a bargain. Both of these types of presentations are recorded and put in the Nagara archive. We offer between 12 and 18 webinars a year and about 12 sponsor solution series a year. And then where the biggest difference lies in these two types of presentations is one, the Nagara webinars, the content is curated and presented by our members and practitioners, while the content of these sponsor solution series presentations is curated and presented by our corporate sponsors. Nevertheless, they're all very excellent ways, between 18 and 24 offerings a year for all of our professional community, because we want you to thrive and learn and be ahead of the curve. So that brings us now to today's presentation, which is going to be offered by Nagara contributor sponsor Gimmal. With digital transformation and AI initiatives accelerating, the need for a comprehensive data and information governance framework for both your physical and electronic records has become more important than ever. Gimmal's end-to-end information governance solutions enable you to consistently manage the life cycle of records, ensuring compliance requirements are met while also maturing your program over time. Additionally, sensitive data can be discovered across enterprise systems and brought into the governance framework to protect your data and mitigate risk. Implementing a complete information governance framework will ensure that your organization's information is properly managed, protected, and leveraged to support your digital transformation journey. And that's what Gimmal offers. Now, today's presentation is going to be offered by three of our friends from Gimmal: Erin Thibodeau, Kim Tran, and Abby Lewis. Ladies, we're delighted to have you as our presenters today. And now, the rest of the time, all 50 minutes of it, is now yours. Go ahead and take it away.
All right, so hey guys, I will be your MC for today. For those of you guys who don't know me, my name is Abby Lewis. I am the SLED account executive here at Gimmal. As Johnny stated, joining me, I have my colleague Kim, as well as Erin from Momentum. I don't want to butcher anybody's introductions, so ladies, if you don't mind, I will let you guys give a brief introduction of yourselves. Kim, why don't you go first? Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you, Abby. And so some of you may have met Abby in person. She was at Nagara last week, and I was actually at Nagara last year, and I had a lot of FOMO missing out this year. And so hello, everyone. Hello to old familiar faces and new faces here. Thank you so much for joining us live. You may have seen me in past Gimmal hosted webinars, but this is my first Nagara webinar, so I'm excited. My background here at Gimmal, as well as previous to Gimmal, I've pretty much been in every single industry aside from data governance and information governance previously. So mostly focusing in highly regulated organizations, as well as publicly traded companies such as Capital One and financial services, .com in the internet infrastructure space, as well as EdTech, serving our partners in higher ed. So with that being said, I will pass it on to Erin, who is one of our Gimmal partners here, Momentum.
So, hi everybody. Thanks so much, Kim and Abby. Thank you guys for having me. We're really excited about the partnership with Gimmal. I've been working in records management content services for a little over 20 years. I joined the Momentum team last May. The company that I ran out of Atlanta, Georgia, was acquired by Momentum, and we're really excited about that partnership. And through that, I was able then to also meet Kim and Abby and the other great people over at Gimmal. Momentum is a Laserfiche premier partner who works with organizations that are looking to step forward in their digital transformation journey. And we work with people who are in all stages of that. They're based just outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, but we serve clients all over the United States and Canada. So really excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Great. Thank you so much, Erin. Reiterating on those housekeeping rules earlier that Johnny stated, if you guys have any questions, feel free, raise your hand, or write them in the chat, and I'll try to keep an eye on that so we can answer them as best as we can. We won't get super technical today, but if you guys would like to set up a more in-depth conversation with myself or Kim or Aaron, please feel free to let us know. We'll be more than happy to set that up for you guys. And of course, above all, enjoy the webinar today. Soak up the info. Let's get educated on this digital transformation. All right, Kim, are you ready to go?
I am ready. So to kick us off, as we were getting ready to prepare for this webinar, today we'll mostly talk about digital transformation, but less about the technology and more so the people and the processes. And so I'm being a little cheeky here, but are we really talking about digital transformation or digital ambition? Having been at a Fortune 500 company previously in the financial space, going through massive digital transformation as the bank was integrating physical branches, acquired companies, acquired teams. There was a lot of ambition swirling. And as I was thinking about this, the analogy that I was thinking about was when I first bought my first home. It was a 1940s gem, lots of work needed, a lot of ambition as well in terms of what we were trying to achieve, especially with the realities of capacity and budget and know-how. And so I like to talk about digital transformation in the sense of balancing what you can achieve yourself, what you can achieve in the short term, and then what needs to be completely rebuilt, completely renovated, and revamped, and in many cases require external resources or additional budget. And as anyone knows who have gone through a major renovation, you will likely not be on time with your deliverables. Something will likely very much go wrong, and it gets messy. It gets completely messy, and it's okay. And so I wanted to kind of kick off with this image and analogy. And feel free to, obviously today is educational, but feel free to share your, as you relate or as you go through these things. Feel free to interject with fun comments as well. We are here to have fun as well as learn. And so kicking that off, also wanted to also go through three differences between digitization versus digitalization versus digital transformation. And again, it's easier said than done. I think many of you, as we have met you last year going into this year, many of you are very familiar day to day. You're responsible for digitization. You may or may not be progressing or actively going through digitalization as well as a full digital transformation. And so let us know, in the chat if this is resonating or where you are in this process and phase here. But I'll let Aaron chime in here because this is what momentum has really helped a lot of customers as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things, especially as you're moving forward through this journey, is understanding this is very much a walk before you run. And there are pieces that you need to take into consideration at the beginning in order to ensure you have that ready access and understanding of where your information assets will lie as you're moving forward. There are a significant number of silos that can be created if you don't understand that you need to have a way to know where your physical records are relative to the electronic records, to understand versioning, understand, if there's duplication, and really getting a handle on that. I think going back to Kim's analogy where she's talking about a house, I was immediately thinking, I was watching a TV show this week. They were talking about painting a wall. And what they wanted was to turn their wall from pink to green. That was it. But what they found was that there was a water problem and they couldn't figure out the right kind of paint to use because it was bubbling underneath. And as you dug in a little bit more, it's like, oh crap, this is a bigger problem than we knew. Initially, people come in very often, we just want to scan our documents. Well, as you start moving back, you realize you've got all kinds of things in those documents. And so, how did that happen? And that points to a bigger process issue. And so, you start moving through that. And so, this is an enormous undertaking. And it's really important to walk before you run and understand that you'll go through these phases, and some of them will take a while. And that's okay because you're still moving forward.
Yeah, and speaking of the phases and the journey, I think, digital transformation has been talked about for at least a decade now. Digital transformation, I actually started off my career thinking I want to become a lawyer, speaking of ambition, and just found out it was not for me. But the legal field has gone through immense transformation in terms of, discovery, integrating legal ops. And so really thinking through digital transformation, yes, it's a buzzword, it's a concept, but it's really about the action that you take throughout that journey. And it's not just the frameworks or the tools. Technology is just one small component, and it's human nature to jump on, tools and technologies to help us. But we don't spend enough time thinking through what we want that technology to achieve. And that is kind of going back to that analogy of renovating your home. We want that big, bright new kitchen or, the great new sunroom, but how are we going to get there? Who's going to help us get there? And so the 5 stages we'll be kind of walking through in the next few minutes here is ambition. This is where people are super excited. We're painting the vision. We're going to be, we're going to get there one day, but we don't know how yet, but we'll get there. And so we'll walk through some of the pain points, the challenges, and kind of best practices from both of our experiences here. Then it gets to the phase of designing. And many of you, as we go through digital transformation, it's not just us. It's not a one-person team, endeavor. It takes IT, it takes legal, it takes compliance. Many times you may also have to work with HR to help amplify and engage folks. And then comes the potentially messy part is deploying things. And a lot of times when we deploy things, we don't always think about documenting or learning lessons in the moment or as they happen. And so we'll talk through a little bit about that. And then comes the fun part, maybe for some of you who have already gone through a digital transformation journey, but now you're thinking about how to standardize it and optimize it and maturing your transformation journey so that now you're preparing for more sophisticated needs like AI. So ambition. I wanted to kind of share a little bit of a career story here. When I first started at a major global media company, I mentioned that I started off at a law firm, decided not to go down the law firm route. I then actually joined our client, Discovery Communication, now Warner Brothers. I had been a Microsoft Outlook shop at the firm. We were working very closely with the IT team and all of that. Suddenly, I joined this major company and they're on a system, I'm going to date myself here, called Lotus Notes. Who has heard of Lotus Notes? I, at the time in 2011, had never heard of it. And it was just mind-boggling to me. Overnight, the minute I joined the company, I suddenly became the expert in Outlook. And so I wanted to remind folks, ambition is a feeling, right? But it's also generating that excitement, but also there's a lot of psychology in overcoming the fear of change and overcoming the lack of confidence that some folks may feel about going through this change. And so the hard part, and sometimes needs other people outside of yourself and or your immediate team, is translating that ambition into action. And I love frameworks here. I love kind of, alliteration, but the why are we doing this? Why are we doing this is so important because yes, digital transformation, you need to do this, but why? And it can't just be because, compliance or because HR told us to do it. Why else are we doing it? Will it make us happier? Will it make us less frustrated? Whatever it is that fits your organization, your team, that rah-rah mantra. This will then pave the path. What are we trying to achieve? I think this is where a lot of folks tend to kind of gloss over the objectives, right? Like, oh, we want to streamline, reduce costs, streamline productivity. But what exactly about that cost? What exactly about the productivity that you are trying to achieve? How will we achieve it? Based on the why, the what, then you can start talking about the how. And then this is always the fun part. Who needs to be involved? And balancing having too many cooks in the kitchen, because that always tends to either deter and or with the right people accelerate your journey as well. And then you can start talking about where and when based on who needs to be involved and how much resources you have. Before I move on to the next two bullets, Erin, I see you kind of like, we've talked about this. We had a run through. Actually, someone joined us accidentally yesterday, and she loved our interaction because all of us were just kind of laughing and sharing our experiences.
Yeah, I think absolutely doing this and understanding different people are going to have different reasons for moving into this transformation. And there is a place for that. Some people are going to look at big picture company goals where you're looking at, or organizational goals, where you're looking at reducing cost and eliminating bottlenecks and enhancing customer service. Some people are just trying to get their job done better, and that job requires information to be readily available in a way that they can predict. And so understanding that, and sometimes the initial steps will not have anything to do with technology. They're going to be tightening up standard operating procedures and making sure that you've defined categories and that there's a taxonomy and a hierarchy for all these records. So, yeah, just the same as yesterday, Kim. It's like, it was like you were reading my mind when you put these slides out. So,
yeah, and I see kind of the chats coming in around Lotus nodes. That makes me just laugh, and again, like very human experience of going through all these different journeys, in different pockets of the country, right?
well,
And so
last week at Nagara, one of the great sessions was about retiring a Lotus database, and
oh, wow.
and trying to deal with all of that. And so it's probably not quite as dated, just because I know that I'm hearing that people are still trying to figure out what do we do with this and get it into an accessible form, given that a lot of those, are standards and formats aren't something just anybody can read. So.
Yep. And actually, speaking of standard operating procedures, I think a lot of times we tend to, it's human nature, and a little bit of a selfish push here is that I majored in psychology. And so I always think about the human behaviors and the human nature of things. But we tend to, again, be afraid of change. And so really transparent in the most radical, candid, honest way possible, truly assess your organization's current readiness levels. People say they may be open to true transformation, or they know they have to do it. In reality, their capacity or motivations may or may not be quite there yet. And so really assessing that on the upfront, taking that temperature gauge, and if you're even, if you're being ambitious, even ranking or even quantifying that readiness levels to see maybe pockets of your agency or pockets of your organization who may be more ready for true transformation than others, and or maybe easier to transform. And then this will be a great segue into the next phase here, but then you can start documenting information, interviews, inputs as you begin the journey and start designing. So design, another story again, before I kind of jump in. But so I mentioned Lotus nodes, going through Outlook, and suddenly overnight, I became this Outlook expert. People were reaching out to me, people I had no idea who they were, what they did. But this was actually really great for me to meet and greet other folks and find other ambassadors and amplifiers. People never believe me when I say I'm an introvert, but I am an introvert. So for me, especially, and for many of you as record managers, archivists, librarians, you may or may not really deal with other departments or other teams really regularly or even at all. And so thinking through a digital transformation, once you've talked through, why you're doing this, who needs to be involved, what you want to achieve, and start designing it, that's when you have to think through who best will not only actually go through the transformation, but be able to amplify what has been done, what needs to be done, and get people excited. If I can do it, you can do it too. And so as I was at Discovery at the time, another full transformation we were doing for the entire corporate legal and corporate affairs team was revamping and digitizing, as well as transitioning from paper to electronics invoicing. Those who work with a lot of external legal counsel, those costs, those lawyers' fees, I have a lot of lawyers in my family, love them, but they are not cheap. And add on the administrative fees of scanning documents, of printing out the documents, all of that. My boss at the time wouldn't have known to capture any of these costs. And so he then relied on me to help become the SME, to help design the workflows. But that being said, it was on me as well to tell my boss, hey, we're going through this transformation. I saw that, XYZ is missing from your workflow. Do you mind if I add that? Who do I work with? And that became a two-way dynamic and collaboration. And so kind of wanted to walk through all of that in more tactical bullet and best practices here. I mentioned creating a compelling vision and communications plan. As a marketer, we always talk about marketing, but even with initiatives like these, you need to identify your internal ambassadors and amplifiers. What does that mean? That means that if I am doing something important, but if no one else knows about it and knows why it's important and what they can help me with, that idea or implementation or whatever I want to achieve will just kind of fall under, a plank and go away. If no one knows about it, it doesn't exist. We all have our own goals, our outcomes, our own agenda. And especially as an introvert as well, selfishly, I need someone more important, more vocal, more likely to speak up, whatever it is, to help amplify that message across the organization. The next bullet is a digital transformation takes a whole village, a whole organization, especially in SLED, those who are working for cities and counties and states, literally a village or several. And so it's really important not to just ensure cross-functional alignment, but really secure it. And how do you secure that? You define roles and responsibilities, but also make sure that people know exactly what is expected of them. An executive sponsor versus a stakeholder will have very nuanced responsibilities, but very different. An executive sponsor will maybe help you amplify or be an ambassador for your vision or your communication plan or your transformation initiative. They may or may not want to know about the decision. They may or may not want to hear about, what needs to be done next week, next month, or whatever it is. They just need that high level detail. And then decision maker versus project or task owner. Someone who is going to make a decision will need a lot of different details and different level of details, as well as level of impact or outcome, versus a project or task owner who will be very tactically oriented or deadline focused. And so once you start defining all of that, then you can start mapping out the project milestones, the checkpoints, the timelines, so that you can then figure out exactly how long it's going to take. So going back to that analogy, we had very ambitious plans to revamp and renovate our house at the time. And actually, if you recall seeing my little image on the right earlier on, our living room was completely ripped out because I was sitting in the living room one day and drops of water started pouring down. And we found out that the ceiling had been flooded previously, and the previous owner had just put on, what is it, drywall. Mind blown. I'm not going too deep into it. But of course, we just had to tear out everything, right? Of course, that set us back. It was November, right during Thanksgiving season. We were not going to get that done by Thanksgiving or even Christmas. So build in the flexibility for emerging needs and also plan for uncertainties. And I know the project managers, I saw someone who was in accounting. You all are probably really great planners, really great at budget and numbers. And so you will keep the creative folks like myself in line. And then be realistic about your strengths and weaknesses. I started off my career in B2B SaaS, software as a service industry, actually as a marketing consultant. And so performing SWOT analysis was very important before we headed into any client engagement. And so SWOT, SWOT, for those who are not familiar, strengths and weaknesses, as well as opportunities and threats. And so again, mapping out your current capabilities and processes will then start to expose the gaps, not to throw anyone under the bus or make anyone feel bad, but really being very objective about what you can do internally, realistically and objectively, or do you need external help? And that will start building out the design, but also building out future needs as you deploy.
Yeah,
the other piece is, oh, go ahead, Erin.
Yeah, I think one of the things too, that when you do that requirements analysis really thoughtfully, it will help you to triage and prioritize as well. Because one of the things, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but it is important to have some pretty rapid successes in any deployment that you're looking at. And if you can identify those where you have a large group of people who will be impacted by the benefits and a minimal weakness, one of the great things I've seen people use is survey tools in order to get the information they need to make the decision about the next step in their digital transformation. But they're using the same tool because they've already decided on that. So that can be a really helpful way to do that. But again, just helping to triage and getting that quick win as you're looking at each of these things. It's, it's been done, there's very little risk. I really like that approach.
Yeah, I
feel
love
that internal
Erin,
pull.
for sure. And actually that brings me to another kind of framework or just mindset that I've used is determining level of effort versus level of impact. A lot of our work gets repetitive and all of that, and sometimes that level of effort isn't always worth the level of impact, and that's okay. But again, just making sure that you assess it objectively. And then the big question is, what can humans do versus technology and AI? And perhaps an even better question live is, what should humans do versus technology and AI? And this is where, only humans and maybe with some help of technology and AI determine. So deploying. Erin, I don't know if you want to share a story here. I can certainly definitely share very many stories as as we talk about deploying here, but I wanted to kind of, have you also share as well.
Absolutely. Well, sure. This was actually a really long time ago. And so this was the way people interact with technology is much different now because we've gotten to where there's much more of a mainstream adoption. And these were very much of the leading edge, bleeding edge, early adopters. But the use case that they absolutely had to figure out how to solve was that their purchasing manager, and it was a state agency in Georgia, the purchasing manager had to go and take care of his ailing parents. And they did not know if he would be gone for 6 or 9 months or 18 months, but he was going to need to be there for the foreseeable future. And the problem that they had was they had no mechanism for him to approve invoices that related to his department. And they were trying to figure out a fax solution where they could send, talk about dating yourself, Kim, trying to figure out how they might be able to fax these documents up to him in Minnesota and have him sign off. And there became all of this question about the integrity and whether or not that was going to work. And so at that point, we had Laserfish, which is the content platform that I've always worked with. And well, what if they scanned them in here? And it was immediate. This was a choice that was going to require 3 users, but impact hundreds of people who would be able to do their day-to-day work. And so while we knew that the plan was much bigger, it ultimately went into multiple court systems within the state. But initially, we just had a high visibility project that also had some humanistic value in terms of how they were treating and ensuring that they were going to be working with this. But it set up a beautiful rollout for an enterprise solution. And so that was one where I feel like we didn't have all the answers at the beginning, but we had every stakeholder that we needed providing feedback regarding the look and feel for both the documents that he would be working with while they were in process, all the way through their final archival.
Oh gosh, you're talking about court documents. I'm getting triggered with, memories of paper cuts, putting all of the document discovery together in those in the mailroom in that first law firm job here. But I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think, things that we don't often think about when we deploy, because we're excited, think a lot of things can go wrong, but a lot of things can go right as well. Especially if you spent time involving the right people, planning out for uncertainties. And for me, and this is probably because, I come from a background and just experience where we're very celebratory. I'm Vietnamese and everything's a celebration in my family, but also starting small. Digital transformation, again, change management, which we'll tackle in a couple minutes on the agenda here, but making sure that you celebrate, whether it's, something that you personally did or your team did, or even, someone else. It's important to do that because it will keep motivating yourself as well as your team, especially when things get messy. There might be a lot of frustrations. There might be the tendency to get pessimistic or negative. And I'm not talking about, toxic positivity where everything's going right, but really, really celebrating it and also recording the lessons learned. I think this is so important. And I know as Erin and I were first chatting about this is, especially for folks who may or may not have been with your organization for a very long time, you're housing so much expertise and knowledge in your head that may or may not be captured anywhere else. And so making sure that you take the time or you use a tool or you use AI to help capture those notes. And in many cases, some of you also might be working with people you've never or don't typically work with. And so this helps cultivate relationships, but also build trust and goodwill. And that is honestly so much of digital transformation. The other piece here, putting my life coach hat on, prioritizing progress and not perfection. This is where you get trapped in ambition versus action. Taking messy action and learning from it will always be better than just sitting there and doing nothing at all and being left behind. And then also, as many of us have to report into risk or compliance or even legal or IT, monitoring things closely so that you can be prepared to remediate if and as needed. Our industry is changing so rapidly, especially in the public sector where data privacy laws are rolling out, I feel like every week. I'm probably being facetious, but how do you respond to that? And controlling what you can control in the moment upfront can then help position you to adapt and be flexible if and when it's needed. Operationalizing. I don't know, Erin, if you wanted to share another story here. I can also certainly share as well, and we can just kind of riff off, but I am also mindful of time as well.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I want to just hop back to one thing is that I want to kind of underscore that you get the flexibility once you have embarked on this the digitization process. That reworking large amounts of data once they are in a digital format is not the same onerous task that it is when it is in a static or paper-based format. And so there's a lot that you can do, and that provides that feedback loop because just like you said, Kim, things are going to change. You're going to find out what you didn't know as you move
Yep.
forward with this. And so that's really one of the things that I feel like, don't feel like you need to get stuck in this, letting perfection get in the way of progress, because the flexibility is still there and is much more profound as you move forward in this.
Yep. And I just had a memory of me being trapped in my perfectionism tendencies. And some of you may or may not know Kurt Thies, who is our VP of Gimmal Physical and has now progressed to the life cycle of information management. But he looked at me one day and he was like, Kim, are you a Virgo? I'm just curious. And that then, I had just started getting to know Kurt at the time, did not, and again, just being human about deploying and operationalizing this digital transformation initiative and getting to know other folks that you will be working with, whether closely or not as closely. And so operationalizing, you've deployed, now comes the hard part, because how do you replicate what worked and standardize that? And making sure that other departments or even other cities or your peers or other colleagues can learn from you. And so silos is a buzzword, but silos are also a reality, especially for those in public sector, publicly traded company, big enterprises. I mean, even here at Gimmal, when I first started, sales and marketing were not really aligned. And so when I first joined, with a couple of months after our CRO and CEO joined, this is where even within our own tangential departments, we became much more aligned and aligning to the same goals. And so beware the shiny object syndrome. I'm thinking of the movie Up for the Disney fans here, but I can't remember his name now, the dog. Whenever he saw a squirrel, he would go squirrel. And so beware the shiny object syndrome, especially if it comes down from leadership, and make sure that you are documenting what actually happened versus what you thought would happen. So to your point, Erin, something that looks great and perfect on a PowerPoint strategy deck or a Word doc document will look very different in the changing reality and in market. And this is another psychological reframe for anyone going through a digital transformation. Failure will happen, and knowing that upfront and helping reframe that as mistakes can be much more objective as well as pragmatic about what should you do differently moving forward. Because part of operationalizing it and leading into optimizing and refining is, it's great to have templates, it's great to standardize, but in this landscape, things will change. For those in software, you are very familiar with the MVP concept, minimum viable product. And so in this context, think about the minimum viable project or process that you can do. When I was previously at Capital One, we were launching new products into Capital One cafes. This was a brand new initiative. Even with our own customers, people were asking questions like, is Capital One now serving coffee, or is Pete's Coffee now getting into banking? What is the deal? And so a lot of that minimum viable project or process was to start telling people what we wanted to do before we even started to do something. And so thinking through all of that, templating and automating and using what we already had to deploy and also start standardizing was really key. And the other piece, we've talked about this before, as you go through, you've deployed, you've designed it, people want to know what happened. It's kind of like, I don't know, for anyone who's a reality TV show, you watch a TV show, you get invested in the characters, and then after the season ends, you're like, well, where are they now? What happened? And so keeping people informed, keeping people involved with updates, and making sure you're speaking their language. There's so much content out there now. So as humans, we really need to provide context. And this is where, humans versus technology or AI is not going to have that context unless you provide it. So whether it's legal, risk, compliance, finance, FT procurement, everybody will have different levels of context, different languages, different terms. And we kind of have to, if you are the owner and or a task owner or decision maker in a digital transformation initiative, this is something that has been really beneficial to me as I go through it. Optimizing. I worked for very creative companies, but as I started as a consultant, we were very also quantitatively oriented. That may or may not be the culture or the expectation for your organization, but everybody loves cutting costs. Everybody loves efficiency. And so as you deploy and operationalize and standardize, making sure that you look back to shed outdated things that may not be working anymore. And so that you can really just focus on what is working, right? We talked about SWOT analysis. We talked about level of effort versus level of impact. What worked, what didn't work, what should we start doing, but more so, what should we stop doing? That is most important because many of us are dealing with the reality of here's the budget, here's your head count, that's it, do more with less. But I'm challenging you to think, do less first so that you can do more. Figure out where and what you need to let go of. The other piece that I want to leave you with is don't get emotionally attached to a project or process. I, by nature, I love what I do. I love, interacting with folks, and I get very attached to my work. I'm not afraid to say that. But when it comes to a digital transformation initiative, you need to be ready to let go of what's outdated. I talked about, a fresh coat of paint, or is it a complete revamp and renovation? And a lot of things are no longer relevant, but may be even a hazard or a potentially a risk. And so as you optimize, something that worked and something that may have been a determinant of success in the past may or may not no longer be the goal. And so I want to make sure that, as you all think through this, to let go. Another Disney reference, let it go. Anything else from you, Erin, before we go into physical versus electronic records, do's and don'ts?
So one of the things about the not getting emotionally attached to a project, I think when you set up the expectations at the beginning, for people to understand that this is a journey and it is going to change. That is what happens here. You're going to be taking steps forward, steps backwards. Processes are going to change. And so this is the best thing for us to do at this point in time with the data we have. We're going to get more data. We are going to progress in time. We are going to be able to ask other people who operate with our agency or company to change the way they work with us once they've built that confidence. And all of those things will contribute to that change. And so setting that expectation up at the beginning is this is no longer, it always worked. This is changing every day based on what else changed today. So
Erin, in your 20 years of experience, I cannot imagine how many lessons learned, quote, quote, mistakes that you have encountered, on behalf of customers that you've worked with, or even for your own organization. Barb says scary pictures. And so talk me through some of the do's and don'ts really quickly.
I think one of the things just to be mindful of is that with groups like Gimmal, our ability now to marry the information stored within physical records versus trying to figure out how to incorporate them or needing to do a massive backfile conversion before you can get full value out of a system is one of the big changes that's happened now. These are beautiful, beautiful file rooms. I was in a major railroads file room, and we used that picture for years because it was really the scariest thing. We found out about companies who paid warranties. I mean, that physical records is a big deal. But figuring out how to only convert what you need, managing the fact that we know they're in a file room. I had one project where we actually quadranted out the room. And so you would say, okay, this is an E1 and this is in, E2. And it was based on a grid map that we could cross-reference. And once the document was retrieved, it would then get scanned into the system, because we go on the value that a document that comes back to life is most likely to stay alive. But a lot of these old documents, you don't need to put a ton of resources into converting them in order to get the full value out of the system. And recognizing that as long as you include the information about where it is so nobody thinks I can't find it, you're in pretty good shape. You need people to trust that there is a single point of authority that is going to tell you where to look if it doesn't house the record itself. And so that minimizes the frustration they have, because people get very frustrated when they go to one place and it's not here. And you don't even know if it's over here, but over here is much harder to search. So getting all of this into one consistent repository with at least a level of metadata can really help with that. I think not one of the things that people used to feel like they had to do was outsource scanning. And you can get this down to where there is this SOP and a transactional conversion methodology that doesn't put everything on. And the beautiful thing about that is when you have a retention schedule that is moving, on one side it's kind of eating your files because they've hit end of life or disposition, and then the other side you're creating new documents digitally, so you're not creating more paper. That gaps gets smaller and smaller, and finally you will end up with nothing left to scan except for the normal stuff that comes in from people that aren't operating electronically. So as far as big do's and don'ts, don't convert everything, identify rot, figure out what you don't need. And
Thank you, Erin. And awkward moment here, but speaking of new homes, a contractor just came in. So, so I don't know what my background looks like, but I wanted to kind of piggyback on what you've already shared here. But someone during a webinar and a live conference recently said something to the effect of paper records are dead. And I had a visceral reaction to that. First off, because I love physical handwriting. I love physical written notes, thank you notes, all of that. But also physical records are evolving. A lot of us are going through, like you mentioned, right? A lot of these documents will be important to retain. And many of you are retaining records and documents and information and data for our country, literally, cities, states, counties. We are in an election year, all of that. We will need paper records. We will need physical records. The frustration point, perhaps, is having that experience, quote unquote, mirror digitally and or electronically. And that is not always just a one-to-one, apples to apples comparison or migration process. And so when we design our digital future, a lot of it will need to be reimagined or re-envisioned just for electronic or just for digital, rather than taking what we're already doing physically and interpreting that into the electronic or digital space. So wanted to be mindful of time here, because I know obviously both you and I are so passionate about this, and I love the engagement. So shout out to everyone who has been engaging with us in the chat. I love seeing the little pop-ups here. But as kind of a closing note here, best practices, strategies for change management. And obviously we're oversimplifying it. We've spent a lot of time walking through the digital transformation stages, but thoughts, to kind of leave you with here. Change doesn't happen overnight. I don't know if any of you have read Atomic Habits, but the author, James Clear, really talks about one progress daily. That will have compounding effect. On some days, things will just go crazy and messy and nothing will be achieved, and that's okay. Because as long as you keep aiming small and starting small and having that progress daily, that will help tremendously. And then
I think,
Oh,
Kim, you
sorry
want
about that. Am I
to?
freezing up?
You are back.
Okay. And then prioritizing what's actually important and what's mission critical, because not everything is a necessity. Um, Even if your boss says it, maybe. But thinking through level of effort versus level of impact again, and performing that SWOT analysis, communicating. This is so key because people tend to not hear a message the first time or even second time or third time, right? Um, Especially in the age of distraction and AI and LinkedIn and social. And for those in the physical office, maybe your coworker wanted to stop by to, have a chat, right? Communicate and then communicate again across channels, across mediums, across formats. And then consistency is key. Making time and resources for ongoing efforts. Digital transformation is not a one and done type of initiative. It will take continuous effort and consistency as you go through the journey. So I wanted to open it up to Q&A and as well as share some resources and useful links on the Gimmal side here. But we do have blogs talking about not just records management, but data, raw data, especially and sensitive data. We also have a lot of customer stories, such as City of Allen and T-Slack, and then upcoming events. We are very excited to see you all at upcoming events in the fall and beyond. And then for those who are customers, I recognize a couple of names here. Hello and thank you. We see some of you as well on our customer education series where we dive deep into product features, technical capabilities, but also just Gimmal webinars where we talk about topics like this today as well. And so wanted to leave you with what actually happened in that reno. Other than, we painted the house red, or not the house, sorry, the front door red. The grass is looking like it needs help, but again, progress, not perfection. If you recall, we teared off the entire ceiling. It was a mess. And that is the brand new living room with my canopy at the time that I won off of live auction. And so wanted to leave you all with our emails here and maybe time for a question. If not, that's okay. But please reach out to any of us. Thank you, Erin, for Momentum for joining us as well. And we will hopefully see you all virtually or in person soon.
Thanks so much, Kim. Really appreciate it.
Thank you,
Great.
Kim.
I'm looking in the chat box for any questions. I'm seeing some nice renovation advice. Maybe if you stain the fence the same color as the shutters, you might get a nice aesthetic. Are there any questions pertaining to the presentation? Enter them into the chat. We'd be happy to answer those. I've seen a lot of thank yous. Nice presentation, great presentation. We'll give it just a second here to see if we get any questions coming in.
Yes, Tim, please shamelessly borrow / steal. We will upload this presentation and also follow up with the deck as Johnny mentioned and Abby mentioned earlier, but the recording will also be sent out.
Great. All right, I found a question. How have you handled the transition from digitization to digitalization?
I am more than happy to take that, Kim, if you'd like me to.
Yes, yes.
Okay. I think one of the things when you look at digitization, you are really looking at changing the format of the records. And so what you're asking people to do is to change the way they retrieve the records, but you're not really asking them to change the way they change their business processes day to day. It's really an at file room level of digitization or of scanning is essentially what it is. Once you move into digitalization, you're still limiting the people that you're asking to change, but now you're really looking at putting in some more automated processes. And so that requires that you at least have your active records digitized or incoming records are now going to be created digitally. And so you still just ask the same people who are approving invoices, maybe now they do that through a repository tool as opposed to, or a forms tool as opposed to that, but they're still working with the same invoice, and you've not asked your vendors yet to change the way they work. Once you finally move into digital transformation, that's when all of a sudden things are wide open. You're looking at client self-service and vendor submission using a prescribed mechanism to get invoices paid within a certain time frame. I use AP just because most people are familiar with the concept of that, but I don't know if that helps.
It does, thank you, she says. Okay,
Okay, great.
2 other questions. Let's say you have 14,000 boxes, just a random number. What if you have 14,000 boxes in the record center? What is the best option to consider for digitization, considering the limitations on human resources?
You want to go, Kim, or you want me to do it?
Oh, you're muted.
Oh, you're on
Yeah, I'm
mute.
having issues with my audio a little bit.
Now we
if you
can hear you.
Yeah, if you don't mind tackling that one, Erin. But
Got it.
Abby and I also, yeah, we can.
Sure. The number one benefit to digitization is rapid retrieval. One of the things I do, because this is a Nagara audience, I want to acknowledge that a lot of the things that we talk about is really talking about the business value of documents, and the archival value is separate. There's a benefit still to reduced handling by digitizing, but there's still intrinsic value in the actual originals. And so I just want to make sure that you guys know that. In a situation where you've got 14,000 boxes in a record center, I would look at the retrieval rates and whether or not you're looking at anything. We had a situation in a school system where we started to see an influx of requests for records that were, and I can't do the math, but basically it was when people were applying for Social Security, it was a very rural area. They didn't always have birth certificates, but they did have school records. And so getting those school records, so you're seeing that, hey, we can predict when we'll need to retrieve these quickly. And so there might be an approach that's standard. Otherwise, very often just going from newest to oldest, because the newer records are more likely to be retrieved unless you're in that, situation that's based on business needs. But looking at that retrieval rate is going to be your best payoff. And then depending on the retention schedule, you will likely also reduce the total volume of records that you need to convert.
Thank you,
Great.
Erin. And yeah, I would add to that, obviously I'm oversimplifying. I also love analogies here, but it's kind of like requesting a book from your library. You could go to the library in person and ask for a specific book and then find out in person that the book is not available. And so digitizing the ebook or digital book, you can check that ahead of time. Accessibility, as Erin mentioned, but also securing the book and making sure that whoever accessed it has access to it through the digital channels, and that process can then, which digitalization is really the process and the systems portion of digitization, is really expanding that past just the one book or the one person at scale.
We had one last question come in. We're over time here, unfortunately, but one last question from Barb, who I think was a follow-up to the digitalization question. She said, are you saying in your answer that it's not necessary to move records that are digitized to digitalization?
I think that once you have digitized records, you can move them to digitalization, but sometimes it's still just a repository of records, and it's electronic library, like an electronic file system. You cannot do digitalization without digitization, but digitization doesn't mean that you have to move into digitalization. That is a tongue twister, Kim.
Yeah, yep. That's what I was like, I need to practice, saying the 3 different words. And I agree with you, Erin. And so no, that's not what we're saying at all. But, as mentioned, sometimes documents need to be digitized, but not accessed, right? Of course, like depending on who needs to access it. But the other piece is digitalization. That's also the process where you figure out who needs access and whether or not they even should have access. But digitization, I think it's that foundational step needed. We have a higher ed customer who started to look for a technology tool because their records got flooded. That's something you can't control. But that doesn't mean that, and the physical records got damaged, all of that. Had they been digitized to begin with, we wouldn't have had to worry about that. But that being said, those documents that were, destroyed or tainted or whatever it is, that may or may not need to be accessed through digitalization. Okay, and with that, I think we need to close out on a positive note.
Yes, we are over time, and that's a great tongue twister to end on. Thank you again, friends of Gimmal and Momentum, for joining us for today's Sponsor Solutions series presentation. And thanks to all of you, the members and colleagues of Nagara, for joining us today. Be well, everyone. Take care, and we'll see you back here with more events coming your way very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye.